Look, I was a college football fanatic long before I pretty much dedicated my entire life to pro football. As you probably know, I grew up on Oklahoma Sooners football in the Big 8, which became the Big 12. Then I went away to Vanderbilt, and I could not help being steeped in black and gold tradition in the Southeastern Conference. But now, on the eve of this year's playoff games, this Saturday, I look back on the many, many years of my college football fandom, and I can't believe what I put up with. Man, I have always had to love college football through gritted teeth while turning off my better judgment, my right or wrong radar. Because everything in college football, from the start for me, always screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. So I had to love it blindly because to this day, forgive me, but I believe the Oklahoma-Texas game, and I went to many of them, at the State Fair of Texas in Dallas, played in a Cotton Bowl before almost 100,000 fans, evenly split right down the middle between Oklahoma Red and Texas Orange, is still the greatest spectacle in all of sports. If you haven't experienced this spectacle, you better at some point on your bucket list, and if you have, you know what I'm talking about. And I also believe that the 1971 Oklahoma-Nebraska game in Norman, which I attended, is still the greatest game I ever attended or covered or sat firsthand and watched. I wrote about it for foxsports.com a year ago. So when it comes to tradition and pageantry, nation-gripping games in quaint rural locales, the NFL can't compete with college football. And trust me, I've been to all of these small-town Valhallas, from College Station to Waco to Lubbock to Tuscaloosa to Starkville to Oxford to Knoxville to Lincoln to Columbus to Ann Arbor, West Lafayette, from Clemson to Eugene to Tallahassee to Pullman. I've been to Pullman. I have covered games in all these places. I know them all. I know all the historical hot spots in college football. So I get college football, and I don't get it. Here we go again. We will all watch. College football has us by the eyeballs. Heck, just for the record, back in the day, once upon a time, I actually campaigned for college football to have just one preseason game. But hey, at least we have a 4-team playoff. But what did college football coaches used to tell me? The reason they all fought for so long against any sort of playoff system was they all wanted that opportunity to actually go to a bowl game, preferably in a tropical clime, take all their fans on a holiday trip, and have the potential to actually win the last game of the season to give everybody hope through the off season that next year could be a little better than this year. And maybe even in the end, if you win your final game, then you could make a case to pollsters that, hey, you belong in the national championship conversation decided by polls. College football players are finally actually being paid. That's been my lifelong campaign. They deserve their piece of the pie. I can't tell you how many columns I wrote about this. Though, of course, now the NCAA does cloak the compensation in NIL deals. It's just money. That's all it is. Boomer. It's just boosters paying big bucks to college football stars to come win games and bragging rights for said boosters. That's all it is. But it's cloaked in NIL deals because obviously powers that be still fear that the old school college football diehard fans don't want to get their noses rubbed in the fact that their quarterback is now making millions of dollars, as college football stars should have many, many years ago. Biggest story of 2022 to me was the freeing of college football players, the paying of college football players, getting market value, and finally having the ability, like coaches always have, to move, to change teams if they don't like where they are, to take a better deal elsewhere by exiting stage right through the portal. What days I went through fighting for this. What days I went through covering the pay-for-play scandal through the 1980s that brought the death penalty, the NCAA death penalty, to Southern Methodist University, SMU in Dallas, where I was the columnist for many years. I was very close with, I will admit it, the head coach at SMU during those days, late 70s, early 80s, Ron Meyer. I liked him. I rooted for him. But as you well know, Ron Meyer finally decided to take advantage of his wealthy zealot boosters who would spare no expense when it came to beating any of their Southwest Conference rivals, Texas A&M. Because remember, those downtown Dallas office towers were filled with graduates of all the Southwest Conference schools, a melting pot of graduates of all those schools. So come Monday, bragging rights were gold, elevator rights, lunch club rights, bragging rights were gold. So Ron Meyer decided to buy the best team that money could buy. And as you probably know, this became one of the all-time greatest 30 for 30 documentaries called Pony Excess. My sound bites liberally used throughout Pony Excess. On National Signing Day, 1979, Ron Meyer called me from his car as he left Sealy, Texas, and all but yelled into his car phone, "We just landed Eric Dickerson." And I said, wait a second, Ron, you already signed Craig James. If you don't remember, Craig James, out of Houston Stratford High School, was at that point the second best running back in the nation to Eric Dickerson, my friend Eric, now the Rambassador, ex-LA Ram. Eric Dickerson was by far the best running back in the nation. So wait a second, little SMU, SMU as they called it, had just signed the first and second best running back in the nation. And if you don't remember how good Craig James was, he went on from SMU to play for Ron Meyer in New England. And their Super Bowl year, 1985, Craig James made the Pro Bowl. That's how good he was. That New England team obviously got to the Super Bowl and unfortunately ran headlong into the 1985 Chicago Bears. I had been led to believe that Craig James had signed with SMU because his girlfriend, who was a year older, was already attending SMU, and that was part of the reason, but probably not all of the reason. So why did suddenly Eric Dickerson shun mighty Texas A&M for that little private school up in Dallas, SMU? I think you know why. Today, my friend Eric Dickerson would command, I don't know, a $5 million NIL deal, and it would all be legal. So the NCAA, obviously, their investigators found SMU guilty of running a slush fund to pay for players. The same kind of slush fund my Oklahoma Sooners ran all through the days of Bud Wilkinson, the post-World War II days, when my Sooners won 47 straight games, a record that will never, ever be touched or broken. In the first few years after I graduated from Vanderbilt University, I wrote a couple of times that I didn't really care whether my school, Vanderbilt, had Division I sports in football, basketball, baseball, because to me, and I still believe this with all my heart and soul, Vandy is the greatest university in this land. Certainly changed my life and made my life. As I grew up, as I grew away from my college days in Nashville at Vandy, I found myself rooting like crazy for Vanderbilt sports, for the teams and for the ex-players playing professionally in football and basketball, and especially baseball. And I started thinking, hey, they're sitting in the same classrooms that I sat in at Furman Hall and Old Science. They're right there in those same chairs. Maybe not, but I like the illusion of it. I like the thought of it. And talk about degree of difficulty. Man, it's hard to get in Vanderbilt, even for an athlete, even if we make some exceptions. And it's even harder to stay eligible at Vanderbilt. So our degree of difficulty is through the roof of Furman Hall. We have to compete against Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee, our arch rival in Knoxville. And yet, I've lost count of how many national championships we've won in baseball. It seems like it's every other year. In my days of rooting for Jay Cutler, as many issues as he ultimately had on and off the football field, my days on cold pizza in 2004, 2005, saying again and again on the air, we got a quarterback at Vanderbilt, and getting laughed at on live TV, getting scoffed at. And then watching Jay Cutler lead the Chicago Bears all the way to a home NFC championship game. I know it didn't turn out well, but he did that in pro football. Jay Cutler made me look like a genius being true to my school, because of all geniuses, Mike Shanahan traded up in that draft to snatch Jay Cutler with the 11th overall pick, one behind Matt Leinart, the Heisman Trophy winner. I bragged about Jay Cutler because I had bragging rights. And I brag about Casey Hayward and Zach Cunningham and Keyshawn Vaughn. I could go on talking about players in pro football right now out of my school. I could go on and on about Darius Garland in the NBA out of Vanderbilt University. Man, I could go on and on because I get worked up and caught up in the emotion of being true to my school. It's just part of the college football, basketball, and baseball experience. So yes, I cannot wait to watch Michigan play TCU and Georgia to play Ohio State. I'm picking Georgia to win it all. It's not out on the limb, it's chalk. But I do root for Stetson Bennett IV because he's the greatest college football story you could ever imagine. He is college football. He walked on at Georgia. He had to leave to go to junior college because he couldn't make it. And he returned to Georgia and finally broke through and started for 2 years. He's 25 years old, is Stetson Bennett IV. He's 5 feet 11 inches tall. And heavens to Rockney, I made the case on Undisputed. I thought he deserved the Heisman. He was sensational this year. It's hard to play quarterback. It's hard to play quarterback for a team that's expected to win every game. And he got them home again and again and again with big play after play after play. That's college football. I hope you enjoyed that video. You ready for more? make sure you click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from the Skip Bayless Show. And don't forget to check out the full episode of the show wherever you get your podcasts by clicking the link in the description.